Documents obtained by this station link Marcus Delacroix offshore of Hof, so recounts from multinational companies designed.
He owned every corner of the city, the politicians, the ports, the shadows themselves. But one woman walked into his world with nothing but a pen and a deadline, and suddenly the most powerful man alive couldn't control the one thing that mattered: his own heart. The city looked different from the 63rd floor. Smaller. Manageable. Marcus Delacroix stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, watching the evening traffic crawl through streets he controlled as absolutely as a maestro controls an orchestra. 20 years ago, his father had died drunk and bankrupt, leaving Marcus nothing but debts and enemies. Now, at 42, Marcus owned the concrete and the shadows, the legitimate businesses and the ones that existed only in whispered rumors and encrypted ledgers. His phone buzzed with the first coded message of the evening. A city councilman confirming his vote on the zoning ordinance. Marcus didn't bother to reply. Of course the man would vote correctly. They always did. Fear was reliable. Fear was mathematics. Apply the right pressure to the right point, and people became wonderfully predictable. The second message came from his attorney. The waterfront development was moving forward, buried beneath 3 shell companies and a charitable foundation that existed solely on paper. Plain. Invisible. Perfect. Marcus poured himself 2 fingers of scotch, savoring the ritual. Control wasn't about violence or theatrics. That was for amateurs and movie villains. Real power was structural. It was knowing which judge owed you a favor, which reporter needed their mortgage paid, which politician's son had a gambling problem. It was building a machine so elegant that it ran itself, with Marcus as the invisible hand guiding every gear. The television murmured in the background, tuned to the local news out of habit rather than interest. Marcus had stopped worrying about the media years ago. They reported what he allowed them to report. Then he heard his name. Documents obtained by this station link Marcus Delacroix to offshore accounts financing the controversial Harbor Point development. Our investigation reveals a network of shell companies designed to. Marcus turned slowly, scotch glass frozen halfway to his lips. The reporter was young, mid-30s maybe, with dark eyes that burned with something Marcus hadn't seen directed at him in a decade. Absolute conviction. No fear. No hesitation. Elena Moretti, according to the chiron beneath her face. She spoke with the precision of someone who had triple-checked every fact, who knew exactly what hornet's nest she was kicking. She named his companies, his lawyers, his partners. Information that should have been impossible to obtain. Marcus should have felt anger. He destroyed people for less than this. But as Elena Moretti's face filled his screen, explaining in meticulous detail the financial architecture of his waterfront empire, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Intrigue. He set down his scotch and leaned forward, studying her. The slight defiance in the tilt of her chin. The intelligence in those dark eyes. The way she held the camera's gaze without flinching, as if she knew he was watching and didn't care. A smile curved Marcus's lips. Slow, dangerous, genuine. Who was this woman who dared to name him? The broadcast ended. Elena Moretti's face froze on screen for a moment before cutting to commercial. Marcus reached for his phone. This required a different kind of attention. The envelope arrived at the newspaper office with no return address, delivered by a courier who vanished before the receptionist could ask questions. Inside, on cream-colored cardstock that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent, was a single line in elegant script. Sanctuary Club. Tonight. 9 p.m. Come alone or don't come at all. No signature. None needed. Elena's editor, Frank, had gone pale when she showed him. You're not seriously considering this. It's Marcus Delacroix offering to meet face to face. When does that happen? When he wants to make someone disappear, Frank said flatly. Elena, you just exposed his entire waterfront operation on live television. Men like him don't invite you to dinner, they send messages. But Elena had already made up her mind. She checked the recorder hidden in her watch, small enough to be invisible, sophisticated enough to capture every word. If Marcus Delacroix wanted to threaten her, she'd have it on tape. If he wanted to talk, she'd have the story of the decade. The Sanctuary Club existed in that gray zone between legitimate and legendary, a place where senators drank with CEOs and nobody asked uncomfortable questions. The maitre d' didn't ask for her name, simply gestured toward a private room in the back where light and sound seemed to die at the threshold. Marcus sat alone at a table set for 2, perfectly relaxed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. He didn't stand when she entered, a deliberate choice, Elena noted. Everything about this man was deliberate. Ms. Moretti, you're punctual. I appreciate that. I appreciate anonymously delivered invitations from men I've just accused of financial fraud, Elena said, sitting without waiting for permission. Very cloak and dagger. His smile was slight, amused. You have recordings of this conversation already running, I assume? Backup files uploading to a cloud server? A colleague who knows where you are? All of the above. Good. I'd be disappointed if you were reckless. He poured wine, something red and undoubtedly expensive, into both glasses. You did your homework on Harbor Point. Impressive work, actually. Most journalists would have stopped at the first shell company. Most journalists aren't trying to expose you. Most journalists are smarter. He watched her over the rim of his glass. You understand what you've done, don't you? The people you've made uncomfortable? I've reported facts. If facts make people uncomfortable, that's not my problem. Everything is your problem now, Marcus said softly. But here's what interests me, you got it mostly right. 80% accurate, which is remarkable given how carefully these structures are designed. But that 20% you missed? That's the dangerous part. The part that will get your story killed, your credibility destroyed, and your career reduced to writing obituaries. Elena's jaw tightened. Is that a threat? It's an offer. Marcus leaned forward, and for the first time, she saw genuine intensity in his eyes. Exclusive access to my world. Real documentation, real interviews, real truth. Not the sanitized version my lawyers approve, not propaganda. You want to know how this city actually works? I'll show you. Every shadow. Every deal. Everything. In exchange for what? The truth. Not the narrative you've already decided on. Not the villain you need me to be. His gaze held hers. Can you do that, Ms. Moretti? Can you be objective when you've already made up your mind about me? Before Elena could answer, Marcus's security chief appeared in the doorway, leaning close to whisper something. Whatever he said made Marcus's expression shift, just for a moment, into something cold and dangerous. 48 hours, Marcus said, standing abruptly. Decide if you want the real story or if you're content being another journalist who thought they understood power. He was gone before she could respond, leaving Elena alone with 2 glasses of wine and a question that felt like a trap. Elena's terms arrived via encrypted email at 2 a.m. A detailed contract outlining editorial independence, no prior review of her work, and unrestricted access to documentation. She'd expected pushback, lawyers, the usual corporate stonewalling. Marcus's response came 30 minutes later. Agreed. My turn. His counteroffer was simple and impossible. 3 weeks fully embedded in his world. No writing, no publishing, no preliminary pieces. She would see everything first, understand the complete picture, then decide what story to tell. Total immersion or nothing. Frank had called it journalistic suicide. Elena called it Tuesday and signed the agreement. The first week shattered every assumption she'd built her career on. She sat in boardrooms where Marcus negotiated hospital expansions with the same precision he used for waterfront developments. Watched him fund community centers in neighborhoods where police response times had tripled. Saw him personally intervene when a developer tried to demolish a historic church, his voice quiet and absolute. Find another property. That building stands. You're not writing any of this down, Marcus observed during a late-night strategy session in his office. I don't forget things I've seen. Elena studied him across the desk, surrounded by architectural plans and financial projections. This is the part where you tell me it's all optics, right? Good PR to cover the crimes. This is the part where I tell you that power without purpose is just noise. He leaned back, shadows playing across his face. My father understood that too late. I learned early. The galas were theater, senators and CEOs performing civility while actual decisions happened in whispered sidebar conversations. Elena watched Marcus navigate it all with the ease of a man who knew exactly which strings to pull, which egos to stroke, which threats to leave unspoken. You're good at this, she said at one event, watching him charm a city councilwoman who'd voted against him twice. I'm necessary at this, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. The construction site accident happened on day 16. Elena was touring a Harbor Point development when the scaffolding collapsed, 50 feet of metal, and went crashing down exactly where she'd been standing seconds before. Marcus's security chief had yanked her back with enough force to bruise, the debris missing her by inches. In the car afterward, Marcus's composure finally cracked. His hand shook as he poured whiskey, his voice low and dangerous. This wasn't random. Construction accidents happen. Not on my sites. Not without warning. Not when someone's been asking questions about you. His eyes met hers, and Elena saw something she hadn't expected. Fear. Not for himself. For her. Someone knows you're with me. Someone wants to send a message. What kind of message? Marcus's jaw tightened. The kind that says you're leveraged now. That you matter to me. He said it like an accusation, like she'd committed some crime by becoming something more than a journalist with a deadline. Elena's pulse hammered. Do I matter to you? The silence stretched too long. Marcus drained his whiskey, his control reassembling itself piece by calculated piece. You have 1 week left of access. I suggest you use it to figure out who just tried to kill you because your exposé just became significantly more complicated. He didn't answer her question, but his shaking hands already had. The call came at 3 a.m. Elena's neighbor, hysterical, saying her door was open, her apartment destroyed. By the time Elena arrived, Marcus was already there, standing in the wreckage of her life with an expression that made his security team step back. Every file cabinet emptied. Every drawer upended. Her laptop gone, her backup drives, even the handwritten notes she'd kept in a locked drawer. Surgical. Professional. Terrifying. Pack a bag, Marcus said, his voice eerily calm. You're not staying here. I'm not running to you for protection. Elena. He turned to face her, and she saw the cold fury beneath his control. Whoever did this knew exactly what to take. They knew about your research, your methods, your backup systems. This isn't random vandalism. This is someone erasing your ability to tell any story. His jaw tightened. You're moving into my building. Security. Cameras. Protection. That'll look great in my article. Journalist compromised by living with her subject. Better compromised than dead. The penthouse guest suite was nicer than anywhere Elena had ever lived. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble bathroom, a bed that probably cost more than her annual salary. But luxury couldn't erase the fact that someone wanted her scared enough to stop digging. They worked through the nights, Elena's remaining notes spread across Marcus's dining table, trying to map who had the most to lose from her investigation. Shipping companies. Political rivals. Development firms. The list was long and dangerous. You never told me why, Elena said one night, 3 glasses of wine past professional distance. Why build all of this? What are you protecting? Marcus was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my sister was 14 when the traffickers came for her. My mother tried to stop them. His voice was flat, factual, hiding depths of pain. I was 17, useless, broke. I watched my father drink himself to death rather than fight. So I learned to fight. Built something they couldn't touch, couldn't threaten, couldn't destroy. Where is she now? Your sister? Medical school. Stanford. She thinks I run a real estate company. A ghost of a smile. She's the only person in this city who doesn't fear me. I'd burn everything to keep it that way. Elena saw him then, not the empire, not the power, but the boy who'd lost everything and rebuilt it into armor. That's why you fund the community centers. The shelters. No one else should have to watch their family be disposable. The kiss happened without decision. A collision of proximity and wine and too many truths shared in the dark. Marcus's hand on her face, gentle despite the calluses. Elena's fingers in his hair, pulling him closer, crossing every line she'd sworn to maintain. They didn't speak about it the next morning. Elena found the evidence at dawn, unable to sleep, reviewing financial records Marcus had given her access to. Patterns she'd missed before suddenly crystallized. His advisor, Thomas Chin, the man Marcus trusted with everything, had been making calls to Dmitry Volkov's organization. Timestamps matching every meeting Elena had attended. Information transfers disguised as routine reports. Thomas was the leak. Thomas had orchestrated the construction accident, the apartment break-in, everything. And Marcus was meeting with Thomas in 4 hours to discuss security protocols. Elena stared at the evidence, her journalist's oath warring with something newer, more dangerous. Publishing this would vindicate her investigation, prove the corruption she'd suspected. But staying silent, warning Marcus, meant choosing sides. Becoming part of the story instead of reporting it. She had 2 hours to decide if she was still a journalist, or if she'd become something else entirely. The data sat on the table between them like an accusation. Marcus deserved to know. But the moment she told him, Elena knew exactly what she'd become. Elena made her choice at 6 a.m., bursting into Marcus's office where he was reviewing contracts, the evidence clutched in her shaking hands. Thomas. It's Thomas. He's meeting with Volkov's people, and your security briefing in 3 hours is a setup. Marcus went very still, the kind of stillness that preceded earthquakes. Show me. She spread the financial records across his desk. Wire transfers disguised as consulting fees, phone records showing encrypted calls, timestamps that matched every attack on Elena with perfect precision. He's not just selling information. He's orchestrating a war. If you and Volkov destroy each other, someone moves into the vacuum. Who? Marcus's voice was ice. I don't know yet. But Thomas does. Elena met his eyes. I just compromised every ethical standard I have by bringing this to you first instead of publishing it. So please tell me I didn't just destroy my career for nothing. Marcus's hand covered hers, brief and warm. You just saved my life. That's not nothing. The confrontation happened in the warehouse district, neutral territory where Marcus's organization met Thomas under the pretense of reviewing security protocols. Elena watched from the surveillance van, her journalism degree feeling utterly useless as armed men positioned themselves with military precision. Marcus was terrifyingly calm as he questioned Thomas, each inquiry a scalpel cut. When Thomas finally broke, the conspiracy spilled out, a coalition of smaller families, desperate to end the Delacroix-Volkov détente, using Thomas as their architect. The construction accident, Elena's ransacked apartment, even the Harbor Point exposure, all designed to manufacture conflict. Follow the money, Elena said through Marcus's earpiece, her investigative instincts overriding her horror. Thomas had to move funds to pay off the construction foreman. Check accounts opened in the last 60 days, minimum transfers of $50,000. Marcus relayed the information to his financial team. 12 minutes later they had names, addresses, account numbers, a complete map of the conspiracy. What happened next, Elena would see in nightmares. Marcus's response to betrayal was surgical and absolute. No speeches, no theatrics, just the cold mathematics of power reasserted. Men who'd conspired against him disappeared into cars with tinted windows. Thomas's pleas for mercy died against Marcus's silence. The message was clear and brutal. This is what happens when you threaten what's mine. Elena found herself on the penthouse balcony hours later, watching the city lights blur through tears she hadn't realized she was shedding. She'd reported on violence, written about crime, interviewed victims and perpetrators. But she'd never been inside it, never watched someone she cared about orchestrate it with the efficiency of a business transaction. Marcus's reflection appeared in the glass behind her. I can't unsee this, Elena whispered. What you did. What you are. I know. He didn't touch her, didn't offer comfort he knew she wouldn't accept. That's why you have to choose. Not between right and wrong, you're too smart to think this world is that simple. But between the story and the life. Between exposing me and understanding me. His voice dropped, raw in a way she'd never heard. Between being the journalist who destroyed Marcus Delacroix, or the woman who stands beside him knowing exactly what that means. The city sprawled below them, millions of lives continuing in buildings Marcus owned, on streets he controlled, protected by systems he'd built from blood and calculation. Elena turned to face him, this man who'd shown her every shadow of his empire, who'd trusted her with truths that could destroy him. If I choose you, I can never write this story. My entire investigation, everything I've learned, it dies. Yes. My credibility, my career, everything I've worked for. Yes. And you'll still be exactly who you are. You won't change, won't stop, won't suddenly become someone safe and easy. Marcus's smile was sad and honest. I am who the city made me. That doesn't change because you choose to see it clearly. Elena looked at the evidence still clutched in her hand, the story that would make her career, the truth that would cost her everything else. She let the papers fall, scattering across the balcony like abandoned promises. Then I choose you. God help me, I choose you. Elena wrote for 6 days straight, barely sleeping, fueled by coffee and the terrible clarity of someone who'd crossed the Rubicon and couldn't go back. She wrote about the shell companies and the community centers, the violence and the hospitals, the boy who'd watched his mother die and the man who'd rebuilt an empire from grief and calculation. She didn't sanitize Marcus, didn't excuse him, but she didn't reduce him to a villain either. The truth was more complicated than that. The truth always was. The man who owns the city, inside the empire of Marcus Delacroix, published on a Tuesday morning and broke the internet by noon. The article was shared 50,000 times in the first hour, sparked trending hashtags, ignited furious debates on cable news. Half the commentators praised her unflinching journalism. The other half accused her of Stockholm Syndrome, of being compromised by proximity, and they whispered something more. Marcus's world erupted in controlled chaos. Business partners who'd preferred him as a shadowy myth suddenly faced a flesh-and-blood man with documented methods. Politicians who'd taken his money scrambled to distance themselves from the intimate portrait Elena had painted. The city council called for investigations. The DA's office released carefully worded statements. "You made me real," Marcus said, reading the article for the third time in his office. "I'm not sure that was strategically wise." "I made you human," Elena corrected. "There's a difference." But human came with costs. For both of them. The National Investigative Journal offered Elena a senior position. DC Bureau, unlimited resources, stories that would reshape national conversations. The editor called it the opportunity of a lifetime. Frank called it a well-deserved escape from the mess she'd created. "You'd be insane to turn this down," he said, though his voice carried something that sounded like grief. "This is what you've worked for your entire career." Elena stared at the offer letter, at the salary that would change her life, at the chance to leave behind the complicated wreckage of loving a man who controlled a city through methods she could never fully condone. Marcus said nothing when she told him. Just nodded, his expression carefully neutral in the way that meant he was bleeding internally. Their final dinner was quiet, held at the same private club where this had all begun. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "I won't ask you to stay," Marcus said, his voice low. "You've already sacrificed too much of yourself for me. I won't take the rest." Elena's throat tightened. "Marcus, but I have something for you." He slid an envelope across the table, cream-colored cardstock that reminded her of that first invitation. "Open it." Inside was a plane ticket. But not to Washington, D.C. To Florence. Business class. Open return. "I own a villa in Tuscany," Marcus said, watching her face. 15th century, completely private, views of the valley that make you believe in God. No guards, no business, no empire. Just stone walls and olive groves and silence. He leaned forward, and for once, his control slipped entirely. "Come with me for 2 weeks. No decisions, no deadlines, no city watching our every move. Just us, figuring out if this is real or if it's just adrenaline and proximity and two people who got lost in each other's gravity." "And after 2 weeks?" "After 2 weeks, if you want Washington, I'll drive you to the airport myself. If you want to stay, we'll figure out what that means, together." His hand covered hers. "But I need to know if what we have survives outside this city, outside the chaos. I need to know if you choose me when there's nothing forcing us together." Elena looked at the ticket, at this impossible man offering her something she'd never expected. Time. Space. A chance to breathe. "When do we leave?" Marcus's smile was genuine, vulnerable, terrified. "Tomorrow. If you'll come." She'd spent her career chasing truth. Maybe it was time to see if she could live with what she'd found. "Tomorrow," Elena said, and watched relief transform his face into something beautiful. 6 months in Florence had given Elena perspective. Distance had a way of clarifying what mattered and what was just intoxicating chaos. She'd written 3 major pieces for freelance publications, turned down the DC position, and discovered that she could love Marcus Delacroix without losing herself in the process. But love from a Tuscan villa was different from love in the city that had shaped them both. The reform started slowly, then cascaded. Elena's article had armed reformers with ammunition they'd lacked for years. Specific names, documented connections, undeniable evidence. A special prosecutor was appointed. City council members resigned. Federal investigations opened into waterfront development deals. The machinery of accountability, rusty from disuse, began grinding forward. Marcus had done something nobody expected. He'd cooperated. Restructured his holdings, divested from the shadow companies, transformed his empire from necessary evil into legitimate enterprise. His lawyers called it strategic repositioning. Elena called it evolution. She returned on a Tuesday not for Marcus, but for a story about urban renewal in forgotten neighborhoods. Her editor had commissioned a series on cities reclaiming themselves from corruption. The irony was almost poetic. The Delacroix Community Center stood in a neighborhood that had been written off a decade ago, now thriving with after-school programs, job training, mental health services. The plaque by the entrance read, "In memory of Maria Delacroix, who believed everyone deserved protection." Marcus was inside, shirt sleeves rolled up, helping a teenager with college application essays. He looked different, lighter somehow, as if stepping out of the shadows had let him breathe for the first time in years. He glanced up when Elena entered, and his smile was immediate, genuine, unguarded. "You came back," he said simply. "I came back," she confirmed. "Though not for the reasons you're hoping." "I know. You're here for the story." He stood, dismissing the student with encouragement and a promise to review her draft tomorrow. "The city's changing. You want to document it, Something like that. Elena walked to the windows overlooking the neighborhood. Community gardens where vacant lots used to fester, murals where graffiti had been, children playing where dealers used to work corners. You're changing too. Trying to. Marcus joined her at the window. Turns out being a myth is exhausting. Being a person is harder, but more honest. He glanced at her. A very smart journalist once told me that truth was more complicated than I wanted to admit. She was right. The power dynamic had shifted. Marcus didn't control the narrative anymore. The investigations, the reforms, the community oversight boards had seen to that. Elena didn't need to expose him. He'd exposed himself, voluntarily, painfully. They stood as equals now, both changed by what they'd survived, both learning to exist in a world more transparent than the one they'd met in. I don't own this city anymore, Marcus said quietly. I'm just part of it now. Trying to be a better part. That's good, Elena said. Because I didn't fall in love with an empire. I fell in love with the man who was brave enough to dismantle it. Marcus turned to face her fully, hope and caution warring in his expression. So what happens now? You write your story, I continue my penance, and we see each other at charity galas? Or, Elena said, stepping closer, we figure out what comes next. Together. No power games, no secrets, no manipulation. Just two people who found something true in the least likely place and decided it was worth protecting. The city lights began flickering on beyond the windows, the same view that had started everything, now transformed by everything they'd changed. Marcus's hand found hers. Ready for chapter 2? Elena smiled, thinking of all the stories still untold, all the truths still waiting to be discovered, all the ways love could be both complicated and simple if you were brave enough to let it be real. Only if I get to write it with you. If you loved Marcus and Elena's story of power, obsession, and redemption, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more intense mafia romance stories. Drop a comment below telling me which moment hit you hardest. Was it the construction site accident, the betrayal, or that final choice on the balcony? Hit that notification bell so you never miss the next chapter of forbidden love and dangerous choices. See you in the next story.